Hello everybody and welcome to episode 19 of Gamers Without Borders. This is TestZero and with me is Ozzie Arcane.
Greetings, citizens.
And Johnny Chase.
Greetings, program!
How are we doing, gentlemen?
Alright.
Yeah, not bad. I just discovered Super Mario Brothers Crossover 3.0 got released, and you had to pull me away to do the podcast while I was playing it.
Yeah, you just kept, oh sweet, they got Ryu Hayabusa in here.
And before that, you're like, oh, I crashed the bike in Battletoads.
Oh yeah, I was trying to go through Battletoads before we started too.
You're so easily distracted.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I always found really fun to discuss. The evolution of different game media formats and how that goes about, how that combines with saving games. Well, this goes back even to the 1990s when we first started seeing the onset of compact discs, but this debate goes back even further than that, with, I think was the oldest one, of passwords versus saved games.
Save games. Next topic.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would vouch in favor of passwords. The only real good use for passwords is something that didn't come up until more recent times where, hey, you can look up a password online instead of actually progressing to a certain point yourself if you are, cheat or something.
Well, the password had a lot of really interesting things to it, where most of them were generated by an algorithm. So if you could crack that algorithm, you could do things in the game you wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. Probably the most famous password out there is Justin Bailey.
I was just thinking of that.
And a lot of people think that Justin Bailey was like a kid that won a contest or something. No, you're thinking of Chris Houlihan. Justin Bailey is pure coincidence.
It's a complete coincidence that it actually spelled a name.
Yes. And a lot of people think that it means like you see Samus just in her Baileys, which is like a term for a swimsuit.
That would be a retarded choice of words, considering
I've never heard that term used before.
Yeah.
But no, it's just a pure coincidence that it parses. There's a lot of other phrases that work if you put them into the password system. It's like Metroid beats Mother Brain or something like that. It actually parses and it lets you play as that. But a lot of people think that Justin Bailey is the only way to play as Samus without her armor, which is absolutely not true. It's just a code like anything else. You can actually append that code onto anything else, and you can get her armorless. I used to know exactly what it was. It's only a number in like the second box, and everything else is 0. So there is a code you can use to just get armorless Samus and nothing else. And it's like all zeros, and it's like 8 and into A in the second box at some point, and then it's all zeros again, and then you get armorless Samus. But I thought that was always really cool. And you can also get passwords to parse that you couldn't ordinarily get at all in the game. There's actually passwords that allow you to start in Turian without the morph ball, so there's actually no way out.
Oh.
That's always kind of an asshole thing to do. Like, you give somebody a password and they start in Turian without the ice beam and no morph ball.
You're screwed!
Yeah.
Of course, they could just start over and try new because it's just a password. It's not like they erase their game to use it or anything.
No.
But I'd say I probably have a relatively great hatred for passwords due to the fact that I used to play the crap out of Swords and Serpents, which was a dungeon crawling RPG that used passwords instead of a save system.
That sounds like it would be really tedious.
And the worst thing is, it's a 16-floor dungeon, and while there are passwords for any amount of health or whatever, none of the passwords will start you further in the dungeon than floor 10.
Fuck.
That was like the bane of everyone's existence when it came to like NES games that didn't have a battery backup that had the password system. Because a lot of it, including, I think the early ones that adopted this was Kid Icarus and Metroid, where it was uppercase and lowercase and numbers. And when you're a kid, trying to write all those down and remember, is that a lowercase I or is that a 1 and I messed up on the pen writing?
Or is that an O or is that a 0?
You messed up
Or is that a
once.
capital O or a lowercase O?
You mess up once, boom, all of your progress is gone. Maybe in Metroid you got every single missile. You got like 255 missiles and you're ready to fight Mother Brain. It's just because you forgot that one little thing.
You're actually limited in that number of missiles. You can't actually get 255. I think you're limited to like 220.
I might be off on that.
There is a code you can do to get 255 missiles. There's actually a code that's only in the American version, the NARPA sword, or NAR password, and that one is, you just NARPASSWORD, and then everything else is 0. That one actually gives you infinite health, infinite missiles, and then a combined weapon of the wave beam and ice beam, which is impossible to get otherwise.
Yeah, though they were the early adopters and everyone else did it. Like, I'm trying to remember all the games with the horrible password systems because there were so many characters. I mean, Metal
Well, the
Gear.
interesting thing is, the Japanese version of Metroid didn't have passwords.
No, you saved on the
Japanese
disc.
version of Metroid actually used battery backup.
Well, in Japan, it was on the disc system. It was on the Famicom disc systems. You saved right on the disc.
Exactly. So it would actually save it on the disc. And the first game I think that we got that did have the save feature was Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
Yes. And therefore, and then any game that came afterwards that had a password, you kind of wanted to punch the people for not actually using the save system. I think
there's some games that lend itself well to a password, because one thing about passwords is that if you do end up in like an unwinnable situation, you can use a previous password. But if you save over your game, that's it.
Yeah, and battery backup does tend to die out. One of the games that was notorious for doing that was Pokemon Gold and Silver, because of the fact that they added in the day and night system based on what time you set it at. If you set it by your own world clock, it would cycle between day and night. That took a hell of a lot more memory to run, and that just killed batteries. And let me tell you from experience, I've replaced batteries in about 4 or 5 Pokemon cartridges. It is a pain in the ass to get those batteries out because they're soldered in. You gotta like edge in with like a flathead screwdriver and poke them out.
Yeah.
Do you have to get a tri-wing screwdriver for that?
No, the tri-wing is for GBA cartridges and the consoles. The Game Boy security bits. I can't remember the measurement. I think it's a 3.8. You gotta order them especially online. No hardware store is ever going to carry those things. If you're lucky like me, I got like the bits to open up any cartridge up to GBA. I got like a 3-pack for like $10 online on eBay. Those things are a lifesaver if you don't want to like give it off to someone and have them fix it and charge you like $20 or $30.
So, well, one thing that was cool about password systems, there were games like River City Ransom or Gauntlet that they didn't have a save feature, but you could use a password for your character. And that meant if you were playing multiplayer, you could actually bring the password like over to your friend's house and you could continue your game with them without having to save onto their cartridge.
Now that's kind of cool. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of games used that idea. Actually, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here. One thing the worst experience I ever had with a password was Pool of Radiance, which was a port of a PC game, and they knew there was already a sequel on PC, so they assumed they were going to have the sequel on the consoles as well. So while the game itself used actual saves in order to get the data to transfer your characters from the next game, they had these long-ass passwords for every single character. And the next game never came out.
Oh, jeez.
I had like a sheet of paper that was almost completely loaded with text because of how long those passwords were, and it was pointless.
Yeah, and
you
also
still have that sheet of paper with you?
No.
Or like filed away or anything?
No. I mean, I've long since gotten the entire series on PC, so.
One of the things I remember too with if we go back to battery backups is the fact that with games like Zelda and Dragon Warrior, when you were done playing your game, they would always warn you, be sure to hold your reset button while you power off the system, because you just power off the system.
I never understood why they did that. I never understood why they said that. I did it, but I mean, it always seemed weird to me. It always seemed like a superstition. But the game told you to do it, so you had to fucking do it.
Yeah, and then later on you get games like Kirby's Adventure that have the battery backup to save your progress in the level. They don't tell you to hold the reset button. They're just like, oh, you're done, just turn power off. Like, so if I don't do this with Zelda just because of they've ingrained that in my mind now that if I don't hold the reset button, I'm going to lose all my data. And for something like Zelda, I don't want to do that. I mean, something for Kirby, I'm just like, oh, my data's erased. No, start over. Because that's a side scroller.
The funny thing is, if somebody had told you to do that, like in school, that almost sounds like one of those rumors you hear. He's like, dude, if you hold down the reset button while you power it on, you go to like level 20. It sounds like one of those rumors you would hear. There actually was a game that did that. Like if you press the reset button like 16 times, and then you start, and then you hit the power button, it actually goes to a different beginning than it ordinarily would.
That's kind of weird.
Because the game could sense when you did a hard reset or a soft reset, like the difference between powering it down and just hitting the reset button. So there was an Easter egg in one of the games, like you reset it like 8 or 16 times or something, and it would do something else at the beginning.
I guess
kind of reminded me of X-Men on Genesis when you blow up that codec thing and you have to hit the reset button.
Restart the computer, yeah.
I guess the logic for needing to hold down the reset button when you power it off is kind of how like you're supposed to actually shut your computer down by picking shut down instead of just hard powering it off.
Yeah, it makes sure that everything is closed up and ready to go instead of just accidentally shutting it down. But yeah, there's a lot of games that did that. Like pretty much anything that had battery backup, and it had it in the game. It actually had text. It's like Final Fantasy. You go to the inn, and it's like, don't forget, if you leave your game, hold reset while you turn power off.
Yeah, well, they stopped doing that during the Super Nintendo era, I believe. Partially.
Yeah, you didn't need to do that anymore.
Partially because.
Though I still did it.
Well,
I still did it as a force of habit from the NES era whenever I was playing like Final Fantasy 2 or something.
Well, with the Super Nintendo, it would have felt more awkward because you didn't have regular buttons. You had those weird slider things.
Yeah, you had to you push the reset in and then turn the power off.
But with the passwords, like we talked about the ones that we hate because of those long characters. What about ones we like? I can tell you an example of one I liked. Aladdin on the SNES. Simple.
Where it just had the characters, like the pictures of the characters.
Like, how do I get to...
The cool thing they did with those... Oh, sorry, I was cutting
you
off.
I was gonna say, it's like the cool thing is it would just it was for levels or bonus levels. So you would just be like, okay, how do I get to level 4 again? Genie, Jafar, Aladdin, Naboo. There, got it.
One thing that I always felt was cool when they did the passwords was they had a secret password in there. Like if you put in the password, you go automatically to the bonus round. Then you end up starting the game with like 15 lives or something.
Jasmine, Jafar, Sultan, Jasmine. That's the bonus level.
Okay.
I
never had Aladdin on the Super NES, so...
You know, I don't really have exactly fond memories of old password games, though. I will say I was happy that there was passwords for Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine when I played it on Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection, because then I wouldn't have to play through the entire game to get the achievement for it.
Yes.
That's another thing about passwords, is that if you... For some reason lost your game or you lost your data in a save game, that was it. You had to start completely over. But if you had a password that could just sock the system, you could go to wherever you left it. Or if you were playing on somebody else's system, or just like you said, you moved from the Genesis itself to on Steam, the password still worked.
Yeah.
So I think the passwords get a lot of hate but there were a lot of really cool things about them.
Yeah, when done correctly, passwords are fine. When done incorrectly, you've got stuff like Metal Gear.
You have like fucking 128 character passwords.
Yeah, you get situations like with the angry video game nerd where you'd be like, why is it so long?
Yeah, a lot of those passwords were ridiculously long, and some of them actually, since they were randomly generated, and they could use all 26 letters, uppercase and lowercase, and then the 10 digits. It's like that's like what 62 bits of entropy. You could actually end up spelling dirty words just by pure random.
Yeah.
Which is why if you look at a lot of other password systems, they don't have vowels.
Huh.
It goes B, C, D, F, and
yeah,
it just avoids all the vowels.
I did always wonder about that. I never thought that would be why it would be they would do that. So you can't spell anything that's inappropriate by accident.
Now we're talking about them again. I'm now remembering the password off the top of my head for Super Empire Strikes Back. Or not Super Empire Strikes Back, sorry. Super Return of the Jedi. If you wanted to skip right to the Mode 7 mode where you're piloting the Millennium Falcon over the Death Star, it's RMNVLC. I don't know why I remember that.
What about the password to go straight to Tyson in Punch-Out?
Oh, God.
It's 007.
07373. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, that was another one. That's a password. You don't have to play through the whole game just to try Tyson. You can just put in the password and there you go. You can practice against it.
And that was the thing. They gave you the passwords for every guy you beat. They wouldn't give you it for Tyson, though. Like, I think you only could get that in Nintendo Power.
or Nintendo
Yeah.
Power, or you ask, or you know somebody else who has the
Yeah.
password. That was a great thing back then. Is you'd be able to trade passwords with people. It's like you knew the secret password. It's just like, hey, if you put in Justin Bailey, Samus is naked.
And then you come back the next day and punch him in the yard. Just like, she's wearing a red dress.
It was like purple or something, and green hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how her hair used to be green.
Or then when you get the Varia suit, it changes to a different color.
Because
Or it changes to like bright green when you switch to your missiles.
it was green.
Because of the color limitations.
It was green in the Nintendo game. In the Nintendo Power comic, they made her hair purple. And then, her official hair color ended up being blonde.
Yeah.
But that's shades of last week.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was another really cool thing. One of my favorite games for the Super NES was the Lost Vikings. And they had a really fun system with the password where it actually had something to do with the level. Because the levels didn't actually have names. Instead, they had passwords that were kind of related to them. So it's like, you see this one level that has, like, the first thing you see is these really heavy smashers that are just crushing things down on, like, a conveyor belt. And the password for the level is JLLY. It's like, jelly.
I never played Lost Vikings. All I know that they're a Blizzard property, and they made a cameo in WoW in the Ultraman dungeon. That's all I know.
You might want to check it out. It's pretty damn cool. It's sort of a puzzle action platformer. Ridiculously hard at times though, because if you lose any of them, you have to start the entire level over again. But it doesn't automatically start over.
Oh, I completely went past my head as to another game series that had a good password system. Mega Man.
Oh yeah,
Blue and
Mega
red
Man.
dots.
That was really cool.
That was it. Blue and red dots. And then when they went to the X series, I only played X1, but they had like the little tiny guys with the hats, and you just had numbers. Simple.
Another really cool system that had passwords, Mortal Kombat.
Oh, yeah.
Mortal Kombat before you go into a fight.
To access the Easter eggs and other random shit.
Yes, Mortal Kombat was great in that respect, because you didn't need any of them, really. It was a fighting game. You didn't need passwords at all.
Well,
But these
the one
little codes, these were just like Easter eggs. Like you turn on random fighting or turn on dark fighting.
You know the one everybody loved, the code for one-button fatalities.
Oh yeah, those were awesome.
Because no one could do the fatalities.
And you just want to see them anyway, so why not?
The only fatality I'm able to pull off was with Sector, and that's the garbage disposal. They crush you from top to bottom, and his friendship, because I think it's like run 4 times and up.
And that's one where if you screw it up, you don't accidentally punch them, so you can try again.
Yeah, that's definitely an advantage.
Yeah, because the only other way you're able to see the codes is what the codes did is if you played Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 and you went through the tournament, and after you beat whoever the last person is, then they're like, oh, pick one of these prizes, and it's either one of the Easter egg games, which I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been not Galaga, but Galaxian. Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head. Or the other one would be like a fight with Noob Saibot.
I know there was a password at the end of the Mortal Kombat movie. There was like a password in the credits.
Really?
Yeah, as the credits are scrolling by, the symbols will appear.
I'll have to check
and
that
then
out.
if you input those symbols into the game, you get a special Easter egg.
Now, is that in the arcade? Like, you have to go and put it in the arcade cabinet?
I think it was like Mortal Kombat 3 or Ultimate Mortal Kombat. Any of the ones that uses passwords, I guess. Whatever was out at the time.
Yeah, it was those two. I'm trying to look up the codes right now.
I remember that was like in all of their promotional material. That was just a great advertising campaign. Like all their promotional material just kind of like have passwords hidden in places. Then of course you read like GamePro magazine or whatever, or Electronic Gaming Monthly, and they have like a whole list of passwords in those things. A lot of them were Easter eggs, just kind of start at the special cow level.
Well, since Johnny pointed out the Mega Man passwords were the red and white dots, the funny thing is, since I mentioned Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, the passwords in that were actually variations of the pieces that drop down, which is a weird one.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think they hate passwords just because it's really tedious to input them, but I think they had a lot of really cool features for them. There's a lot of things you could do with passwords that you just couldn't do with save games. So, of course, they have their pros and cons. I think they have a bit more cons than pros, but they're still not as bad as everybody thinks. But I think everybody does really prefer saved games. over anything else.
It's a convenience thing, really.
But, I mean, back then, a lot of the games didn't have battery backup features, so they had to do a password or just completely do away with it. There were games that had no passwords at all, but were just ridiculously hard.
And long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did Battletoads have any passwords?
I don't believe it did. It just had continues. You just had unlimited continues.
Yeah, so if Battletoads had a password, would people have complained about it as much?
No,
probably not.
It would just be like,
if once you did rent it, you could just write down your password and then rent it again, and then you wouldn't have to worry about having to. You could just start over again later.
Once you got past. I'll let you
I was going to say, it could just be like you go rent the game and it's like, hey, you want to play Battletoads? Sure do, but first, fuck this speeder bike level. Punch in the code. All right, let's keep going.
Although they did have a level select code, which is quite similar to that, I suppose.
Yeah, but it was a cheat that you had to actually know about.
Yeah, I think right now we're kind of blending into the whole password, like something you physically punch in, like, the Konami code with something that was meant to, continue your progression in the game.
Yeah, so, I mean, one unsung feature about a lot of the Virtual Console games is that it does save your codes and it does save your data between sessions. So if you have like a puzzle game or something and you get a high score, it'll actually save it on the high score list. Because it didn't do that in the NES days.
Yeah, because
if you got a high score in Tetris and you turned the game off, that was it.
Yeah, because you
had to write it down in a little notepad on the back of the instruction book.
Or take a photo with it and send it to Nintendo Power to get on those high score lists.
And of course, taking a photo with stuff back then, you didn't have digital, so you had to actually use the camera, and it ends up looking like shit.
Yeah.
Because the flash it reflects off the screen, and then you just get this big white starburst on the screen. Like, see, you can kind of see a 2838. It looks like Betty Symington.
Of course, with saves, there are also advantages and disadvantages, particularly with a particular type of saving, like auto-saving.
Oh, yes, auto-saves. But those really didn't become a problem until much later, until around the PC era. But then there's games like, and of course, if you didn't save and you died, you really didn't have anybody to blame but yourself, and it still kind of pissed you off though. Because if you look at something like Final Fantasy VI, there were times in that game where you could end up in an unwinnable situation. It happened to me my first time playing, where I got Bannon on my team, and I saved and I just exited. And I just went down into the river. But Bannon was such a low level that he had no way of surviving any of the combat. And I couldn't leave and level up, because if you go back, the guys will kill you. So I had to restart the entire game and play through again from the beginning, just because I ended up in an unwinnable situation because of that.
Yeah, though most games don't usually put... Well, actually, that happened in quite a few RPGs now that I think about it, where you could be in a situation where you're fucked. It's like... It's like... One thing I learned about RPGs is sometimes you really need to have more than one save. Like, you need to have a save when you know you're in a safe area, and then when you're going into an area that you know you can't go back from until you finish it, you need to save that separately.
Yeah, I always did that.
I learned that the hard way with Final Fantasy Tactics when I had to fight Wheatgraph, and I couldn't beat him. You had to fight him solo with just Ramza. And there's not a whole lot you could do to win that if you had not sufficiently prepared ahead of time.
Yeah, that's one of the low points I had with... I just recently finished my playthrough of Dragon Warrior 4 on the NES. They don't allow for multiple saves. For multiple stories they do if you want to start up one, but you can't save... you're allowed 3 save files, but you
Is there any way to duplicate your save files? Like copy a save file?
Actually, I think there might be in the beginning.
Yeah, that's a way to get around it, but you have to back out of the game completely and duplicate the file and then go back in again.
Yeah, but
a lot of times you don't really have that option.
Yeah, well, the thing with Dragon Warrior 4 though is that it doesn't really give you any chance to get fucked over. Like, if you go to a boss and he just kills you, you just get sent back to the priest that you last saved at. Your penalty is you lose half of your gold, but at least you keep your level and your XP.
It's kind of par for the course for the Dragon Warrior games.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to the point that I was at near the end, I mean, I've got everyone leveled up reasonably and got the best armor pretty much, so I didn't mind losing the gold.
So during the time when cartridges were ending and we moved over to discs, we did see this whole new insurgence of a lot of games would use passwords because you couldn't save data on a CD.
True.
So you had to have the memory card. You had to have the memory unit. You had to, like, stuff like the Sega CD. Didn't the Sega CD require a memory unit for it, didn't it?
I think it had a hard drive. I'm not sure.
It did? Even back then?
I'm not entirely sure. But
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure either. I never owned one.
Because I don't remember. I remember one of my friends having a Sega CD, and I don't think he had a memory card. I think he just had a small hard drive in it, and they just lucked out that the game didn't get anywhere near enough good games for it to fill up.
Right. Actually, I'm starting to think now because Sega Saturns didn't have memory cards. They had an internal
Sega
memory
Saturn
unit.
did.
No,
Sega Saturn did have. Well, it had a memory card unit that you would put in the back of it, and you didn't.
Yeah,
really have to
it was a cartridge. They had a memory cartridge that you stuck in it, but it did have internal memory. It just didn't have a whole lot. So you really need, if you were playing RPGs, you really needed the expansion to add memory to it.
So yeah, that was when we had the onset of things like memory cards and the uses of block-based saves instead of like being saved in kilobytes or whatever. It would be saved as blocks because I guess people thought that was easier to understand.
Yeah, I'm assuming the Saturn ended up having the memory cartridge due to the fact they probably realized just having a tiny internal wasn't feasible after the Sega CD. Although the funny thing is, actually, is we went straight to cartridges, but before that there were systems that used floppies.
Ah, yes, floppies over on the PC.
And you could save, and on the Commodore, and you could save directly on the disk without a battery backup in there, which was very convenient. Just a small note before we head forward.
It always seems strange to be saving onto the same disk that you're reading off of, because it's like, what happens if the computer saves wrong and then overwrites like critical files on the disk?
I believe that
there goes your game.
I believe that's why they even though now they'd be like piracy, I believe that's why back then they actually encouraged people to make backup copies of their games.
Right. Because back then they also added in the the code wheels or whatever, or code cards.
Yeah, that was that way you couldn't have more than one person with the game because only one of them would have the code wheel to get past the start screen.
And then of course the code cards that were like red on black, so if you tried to photocopy them, it just turned out black.
Oh man!
Yeah. But we'll be getting into that during our DRM episode.
What we're talking about now, going from the cartridges to the discs, is aside from the save features, one thing that I will say is I was far more likely to buy a used cartridge than I was to buy a used disc.
Yes, because people treated their discs like shit.
People treat everything like shit, but it's a lot harder to damage a cartridge than it is to scratch up a disc.
During during my high school days, I had this mantra: don't lend CDs to people who are used to using cassettes. Because with a cassette, you can just do whatever you want with it, and it's not really going to take much damage. But a CD, you got to be careful as hell with those things.
One of my friends to this day is usually too lazy to put the discs back in the case. When he takes it out of the system, he'll just lay it with the important part facing up.
Well, at least that's helping, because I have friends that would lay it with the written side down. It's like, of all the ways you could do that, that is the worst possible thing. If anything, just written side up at least. Put it back in the disc, put it back in the box if you want to be good, but if anything else, written side up, please.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a few times that I have bought used disc-based games, and I regretted it because the scratches on it screwed me over.
Yeah, I've run into that a couple of times. It's like you reach a point on the game, and it just can't load that part of the game.
I had a used copy of Army of Two, and me and my friends were trying to boost some of the online achievements, and most of the time it would run fine, but then there'd just be times in the middle of a match I'd get a disk read error.
That happens with my copy of Fallout 3, actually. I accidentally kicked the 360 when it was running. Because I was, crossing my leg, and my leg hit the memory unit. Oof. Again, memory units and discs. It causes trouble.
Of course.
And then when I took it out of the disc, there's a huge crescent-shaped cut in the disc. I'm like, fuck!
And, of course, I should know better that when I buy a used game to at least check it and make sure it works after I get it. But for some reason, when I got Enchanted Arms used for like $3, I didn't bother checking it. And then when I went to play it like 6 months later, it didn't work.
But at least if a CD doesn't work, you could get another copy of it, and your game save will be safe because it's on the memory card.
Yes.
So that was the big thing. It's like, you had the cartridges that had all your game saves on the cartridges themselves, then you had the discs that had all your game saves on one memory card. So if you lose the disc, you could continue, but if you lose the memory card, that's all of your games.
Yes.
And that's probably the one thing that kind of detracted me from switching over to a PlayStation. Like, I stuck with Nintendo, and I went Nintendo 64 because I'm like, everything's on the cartridge. I don't have to worry about memory cards per certain games. But like with the PlayStation, I'm just like, I get this memory card. It's going to take forever to load, and this thing's so small, I might lose it. Oh, I
leave it plugged into
away.
the PlayStation, really, but
Yeah, but I mean, like, if we want to take it over to a friend's house because you've got like the entire roster for like a wrestling game, you want to take that over so you don't have to sit there for 3 hours and play story mode to unlock it, because like loading screens in those games were horrible.
Not only that, the other problem with the PlayStation memory cards, at least for the PlayStation 1, is those things didn't really store a whole lot of data, and some RPGs...
Yeah, they had 15 blocks.
And you don't know what a block is offhand, but the thing is, there were RPGs that would take like 4 to 10 blocks of data, and you're just like, fuck, there goes the whole memory
I had
card.
a game, I've had Diablo on the PlayStation, and saving the game took 10 blocks of data.
Yeah. Diablo, like that takes up the whole freaking memory card. You can't do anything else on it.
You had to basically have a memory card for Diablo, and I actually did that. Had like Diablo written on there and a piece of like not tape, but like on
and you know why? Because Diablo, the dungeon is randomized, so the memory card has so much data that it has to store for that game.
Would it just have to save the dungeon key?
I don't know, because I don't really know how the randomizer works.
Because the other option was to just save your character. And a friend of mine at my school suggested that before I got a second memory card for it. And that really helped, although you had to kind of blitz through the first, 10 levels of the dungeon before you could get back to where you were.
I mean, you'd think certain things wouldn't even take up that much space. Like, it baffles me how large the file size for your gamer tag can get if you keep playing games. I'm sure Johnny knows well about that, considering all his achievements.
Yeah, I haven't looked, but I think if I go into my memory unit, or if I go into my hard drive where my gamer tag's stored, I'm pretty sure the file size is up to like the 40 or 60 meg right now.
Like I had two separate gamer tags before I traded my 360 in. One of them was just kind of there for like if I was trying a game and didn't want to accidentally get an achievement in it if I hated it. Back before they decided to make demos not show up on your gamer tag, and before you could delete stuff if you only had 0 score in it. But since I didn't have many achievements or anything on it, the thing was less than a megabyte. But my main gamer tag in it was like 25 megabytes when I stopped using my 360.
Yeah, I didn't mind it as that much. But if I go back to the memory cards again, like the other thing that detracted me, and it actually did happen to me, and it also made me go, dear Lord, why did I switch to PlayStation 1, was you had to format them. And if you didn't format them correctly, eventually they would come back and say, in order for you to continue using this, you need to format. So guess what? That 80-hour playthrough of Final Fantasy VIII that your brother has, he's at Ultimisium and is about to beat her. Guess what? He's going to lose that, and he's going to punch you in the face. He didn't actually punch me in the face. He punched me in the stomach, but that's beside the point. He was pissed. And I'm like, well, that's memory cards for you.
I've lost data from RPGs as well. I have a memory card that I don't trust anymore. I just use it for games that I don't mind losing. Because one time I put the memory card in and there was nothing on it, and I was devastated. Because I had like Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 on that card. And I think I had like the ones from like the Anthologies and Chronicles series as well.
Oh God!
So that's like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on that one card, and it was empty. And my brother looked at it, and he kind of like heard something rattling inside. So he got a screwdriver, opened it up, and like manipulated something in there, put it in, and it read the files.
I remember the particular, like, I'm going to say right now, I believe the PlayStation memory card system is the worst file save system anyone has created, ever. The Sega Saturn saves worked far better. I never had issues with those, unless you were stupid and bought a third-party memory cartridge. Um, but I remember a particularly interesting error happening with the PlayStation. Lunar Eternal Blue, when they released that, they revamped the save system over the way it was with the first game to try and make it take less space. They actually figured out a way so that the saves somehow took half a block.
What?
The saves took half a block. But what this actually meant was if you only saved one file instead of two, you had this weird save file on your memory cartridge or memory card that, like I said, is only half a block. And I actually had something happen where when I saved another game, the data from the two games intermingled and corrupted each other because they made it only take half a block. So I lost data for two games because somebody was trying to get fancy with the PlayStation memory system.
One thing I did kind of like about the PlayStation is that when you could go into the PlayStation BIOS and just kind of play around with the memory cards. You could copy files over from one card to the other, and you had those little icons that represented each game. I always liked those.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really cool.
I thought actually the one thing that I've been knocking on memory cards all day, but the one thing it was really cool what it did is, like I said, going into the BIOS and looking at the icons. One cool thing that Namco did with Tekken 3 is that they would actually give you hints as to what to do next to unlock other fighters. So if you highlighted it said play Tekken Force, you had to play Tekken Force to unlock, I think it was Dr. B, the guy that was always on his back, but he was like killer if he got up and hit you with a kick.
It's kind of cool.
I'm trying to remember the other game that did that.
As far as memory card systems go, I think the two consoles that did it the best were probably the Sega Saturn and the GameCube. GameCube used a weird block system, but it actually equaled actual file space instead of number of blocks on screen. One thing I liked about GameCube, or how Nintendo handled memory cards on GameCube, is unlike Sony, who when they realized people weren't happy with the amount of save space you had on a PlayStation 1 memory card, instead of making bigger ones, they let third parties make these memory card plus things that, more often than not ended up wiping your data because they were poorly designed.
Well, the problem with those is that the data itself was already compressed. So what the PlayStation liked to do, they like to compress the data before and then put it onto the card. And when it tried to put it onto the card when it was already compressed, it compressed it into nothingness.
But my point, what I was going for, is Nintendo, when people weren't happy with the amount of space they had on a GameCube memory card, Nintendo made bigger memory cards. They ended up having 3 different sizes of actual official Nintendo brand memory cards for that system.
And all those extra small ones they had, they just packaged them in with Animal Crossing and say, Animal Crossing has the exact amount of blocks you'll need with this memory card we give you, so just use that. That's your Animal Crossing memory card.
And a lot of the GameCube boxes had a little slot here, had a space for the memory card.
They did that with the PlayStation 2 as well, I believe.
Yeah,
that was really nice of them too, because I know they made like third-party things where you could actually fit a couple of PlayStation 1 memory cards in, and it just inside of a jewel case. I thought that was a pretty cool because you would have your memory cards just with you right there.
Whereas, GameCube, it kind of made sense since, like you said, there was actually a game that came with a memory card.
Yeah, Nintendo likes to include their peripherals with stuff. I mean, this is off topic, but when the Wii hit it big and people couldn't find remotes, the Wiimotes, what did they do? They packaged another compilation disc of mini games, and they gave you a Wiimote for it.
Yeah, the Wii Play sold really well, not because the games were very good, but because it came with an extra Wii remote.
Yeah, though, speaking on the disc versus cartridge-based thing, we mentioned that the discs can get scratched very easy. I will say one exception to that. Blu-ray discs are incredibly scratch-resistant. Like, if you find a PS3 game that has scratches on it, somebody probably took a knife to it.
Yeah.
I don't own a PS3, so I wouldn't know.
Oh yeah, they're extremely scratch resistant. I mean, like you would actually have to work to put a scratch in that thing,
Yeah.
as opposed to like if I take like a regular CDR and I drop it, oh, there's going to be some nicks and scratches on it. You drop a Blu-ray, no problem.
Yeah, the only Blu-ray disc I've seen used that was actually damaged was a copy of Ninja Gaiden 2 Sigma that wasn't scratched. Like, somebody had left it laying on stuff, so there was actually, like, crap embedded into the disc.
Ugh.
I was kind of like...
I wouldn't want to put that in my system.
Yeah, I'm just going to download the digital version.
Well, now that you mentioned digital versions, that gives us a great segue into what came after discs and cartridges and even memory cards themselves. Digital downloads and the quote-unquote cloud. Seems to be the way everything is going now, with everything is going towards digital downloads. And a lot of people still like having the physical media there, where it's theirs. They can put it in their system and they know it's theirs.
Yes.
And if it breaks, it's their own fault. But if they lose access to their games for some reason because they can't access the server, it's through no fault of their own. That's just the companies being stupid about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing is with the physical disc, aside from the collector's perspective, there's a lot of people that like having a collection. They like having the discs there. As you said, when you have the disc, you're not at the whim of the servers. You're never going to have to worry about years down the line being unable to play the game unless your system's broken and you can't find a replacement. As long as you have the disc, you're good to go.
Exactly. I mean, there's even beyond that, there's stuff like EverQuest, where, like EverQuest for the GameCube, the official servers shut down a long time ago, but there's still third-party servers you can connect to.
I think you mean EverQuest for the PlayStation 2, because Sony would never release their own MMO on a GameCube.
It probably wasn't EverQuest then. It
Probably
was something
Fantasy
else.
Star
Online.
Fantasy Star, that's it.
Yeah.
Fantasy Star. That one, you can play those things on separate servers. So I like that idea. And a lot of these companies, they do kind of shut down their multiplayer servers. And unfortunately, that does kind of detract from a lot of the single-player aspects of it. I know Demon's Souls, they had a major single-player aspect of it that borrowed from the multiplayer aspect. Like, they could leave messages for you. And when those shut down, that just removed a lot of the aspects of the single-player campaign.
Yes. And then even on top of that, you have the problem where they're not even going into MMOs. That's a completely whole other ball of wax. There are regular games that are multiplayer only. Mag, one that Chris was playing recently and I actually did an article review for, he was talking about that to me the other day, and I'm like, hey, it's a good thing you played it now because the servers are shutting down next year.
Mag's one of those games I never played, so I might have to find that somewhere.
Doesn't that one allow up to like
load it.
128 players on the same map?
Yeah.
I think Chris said he got it for like 50 cents because GameStop or something was trying to get rid of it. But there was the Shadowrun game on Xbox 360. I don't know if that still has its servers running.
No, it doesn't. It actually, their servers closed down 8 months after the game got released because the studio that produced it, I think before it got released, filed for bankruptcy. They shut down.
And wasn't that game online only?
It was
Yes,
online only.
that
It
was
was
my
multiplayer online only.
So, well, the problem with these things is if you can't access the online servers, you just bought a hunk of plastic for nothing. So I think it should be like common courtesy from these companies that if they are going to shut down, they have to release like something to let you do like, without using dedicated servers, just do like direct system-to-system connection or something.
Yeah.
The only memories of that game is 1-800-MAGIC on roosterteeth.com.
And actually something that's incredibly horrible that I want to mention, though, there is an offline mode in it, but Lord of the Rings Conquest, which was the last Lord of the Rings game that EA released, because it did so poorly that they lost their rights to the license, they shut down the servers for that less than a year after it came out because they were just... No one was playing, not many people were playing it anyhow, and they were pissed off about the fact that the game actually lost them the series license. They're still selling the multiplayer DLC for that, even though you can't use it.
Ugh.
Well, that's EA's mentality. I mean, if no one's using their servers, they shut them down.
Are they selling it in theory? I mean, are actual copies being purchased? Or is it just still on the marketplace?
It's still on the Xbox Live Marketplace. Sony pulled it from the PS3 Marketplace. I guess we know where...
okay, we're going to help the people who actually support us and use the Sony, but fuck everybody else who's using Microsoft.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's Microsoft looking out for you. Also, also allowing companies to release games with glitched achievements that you can't attain, and not forcing the company to fix it. But that's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about saving your games themselves? I mean, the games themselves, being able to play them is a different thing, but actually saving your game files online.
Well, I tell you what, man, you gotta love using the cloud to save in Final Fantasy VII. Sorry, I just had to put that joke out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something from the PC version. They seem to be pushing that way too damn much. The fact that it has cloud saves, they are just loving that pun.
I personally don't use cloud saving aside from to back my saves up. Like I don't use cloud saves on a regular basis. Like I have PlayStation Plus, so I can use the cloud on my PS3, but I just use it to back my saves up. I don't want it. For one thing, I don't like the idea of saving on the cloud while I'm playing because I'm worrying I'm gonna end up having some sort of connection issue at some point that's gonna make that fuck everything up.
That's one of the reasons I'm not using Microsoft's cloud service. I've heard a lot of people say that they swear by it. It's like, oh, it's the best thing because I can take it here and I can take it there. And I'm like, I don't really play on anyone else's
Yeah, I
360,
don't
so
know
I don't have
that
to
many
worry
people
about.
that do that really.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about it. I understand for gaming companies or gaming journalists, companies like game trailers or even like the guys at Rooster Teeth because all they have are like 20, 30 Xboxes to do their Let's Plays, their achievement guides, and to do Red versus Blue. I understand that you need a cloud to transfer your stuff over, but man, from some of the horror stories I've heard about the cloud is that it doubles the time for saving games because once you save the game, then you got to wait for it to go and then shut off your system because if you shut it off mid save, there's a good chance you're going to lose it.
So, I mean, the one thing that I like about Steam, Steam Cloud, because you can save the game to your system itself, but then it'll back it up in idle mode. It'll back it up to the online servers. So it's saved on your system, but then there's also backup saved online.
Yeah, though
I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Though I've noticed you can have performance issues with the cloud saving during heavy store traffic because while during the summer Steam sale, it kept telling me that it failed to save my Dungeons of Dreadmore save to the cloud, and I was like, fuck, disable it. I'm sick of getting error messages.
One thing that we did fail to mention earlier in the podcast is with cartridges versus discs, the really big trade-off was load times. Load times on cartridges were just blazingly fast because it was just wrong.
Yes.
It was just read-only memory, and it loaded it fast as hell.
Yes.
Discs were much slower.
Yeah. In fact, discs are still slower than digital is usually because digital save directly to the hard drive, so you're not loading off of an optical media.
Yeah, and I've always encountered that. I'm playing through Metroid Prime 2 right now, and they hide the load times okay in the sense that you have to wait for the doors to open before you can continue. But
yeah,
a lot of times there's enemies just chewing on your ass when you're waiting for those doors to open. It's like, come on, I can hear you spinning, I can hear you clicking in the Wii, hurry up and load already. And then it's just a hallway that they have to load, too. The load times don't make any sense on that game.
Yeah.
It's like the tiny hallway takes like 6-8 seconds to load, but then the huge cathedral-sized room, that loads in like 2 seconds.
It's actually funny when you think about it that them doing something very similar in Resident Evil was what added to part of the atmosphere of the game.
Yeah, with the slow door openings.
Yeah, that added to the dread feeling in the game.
Yeah, I know this has nothing to do with the whole memories and discs to that, but we're talking about loading times. GameTrailers.com actually has an interesting top 10 video, top 10 loading screens. Resident Evil, I think, is at number 1 because of the atmosphere that it caused when you're opening doors. But they have stuff in there
who's
like
a huge Resident Evil fan, and he says a lot of fans kind of despise the door opening animations. They know that it has to load, but they still kind of hate those things.
I didn't mind them. I liked them in Resident Evil 2 when there was like random zombies behind one of the doors.
I could imagine that if you're one of those really dedicated people that like to speed run the games over and over again, I could imagine it getting annoying at that point. But when you're just playing through it regularly, I don't see why it would bother anybody.
Well, a lot of speedrunners, they do things to actually mitigate load times. That actually becomes one of the aspects of speedrunning it. So a lot of players, I was watching a Metroid Prime speedrun actually, and they would shoot the door and get close enough to it to begin loading the next room, but then they would finish what they were doing in that room first. Like he would start loading the next room, and then take the minute to like blow open some crates and hopefully get some health before the door opened and let him continue. So they would find stuff to do in that amount of time that would actually, and it'd only save like 3-4 seconds, but that adds up over the course of a speedrun. That's why I have so much respect for people who speedrun these kind of games, just because of their dedication and all the stuff they do, and taking everything into account.
And I will say on the topic of digital games, since we didn't really dwell on that for too long,
Yeah.
you know, there are certain games that would not get a retail release because they're not a big enough budget game to justify it. And I understand people that want to get the physical copies of, like, you know, the latest $60 game instead of buying it digitally. But it really drives me nuts when there's people that refuse to buy like an $8 game off of the marketplace because I want a physical copy. It's like, just, it's a good game. You're missing out. You're cheating yourself because you're obsessing over the media.
Yeah, I think that is kind of something that a lot of people are missing out on, where we're going to be moving away from physical media completely, I think. I think things are going to end with either Blu-ray or UV-ray. And at that point, that I think we're going to be moving to a purely digital market.
Yes. I mean, a major reason things didn't go the way Microsoft wanted to, where they were basically going to force us into digital only, is because internet speeds.
Well, they marketed it like shit.
Well, not only that, and internet speeds in this country aren't up to snuff for that.
Right. You have to have really good internet speeds to be able to handle these kind of things. And the technology is just not there yet. The infrastructure is not there yet.
The infrastructure is not there yet because it's being held back by cable companies that fear the internet, yet are the ones that are providing it. But they fear it because, well, if you're going to be spending all this time on this high-speed internet, you're not going to be watching our shitty cable television that doesn't have anything good on it.
You're not going to watch Honey Boo Boo and Keeping Up with Kardashians. Get some good TV shows. Maybe we'll fucking watch them once in a while.
Yeah, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit when you mentioned Honey Boo Boo, but yeah, that's one of the
They did a fucking episode of Honey Boo Boo in Smell-O-Vision.
Oh,
but we're not talking about that right now.
No, but one of the things I want to bring up is that I took a lot of flack from people on my YouTube channel over how when Xbox did their 180, I went out and pre-ordered one, and they're like, "Oh, that's all it takes for you to flop." I'm like, "Yeah, it does," because the DRM and the always online and all that stuff wouldn't really affect 30-year-old me. I'm thinking about 15-year-old me who used to live out in the mountains, who got 2.5 channels on a good day, who only had dial-up. And it wasn't until maybe a couple of years ago that my mother, still living at that house all by herself, had to get this shitty satellite service installed on the top of her roof that had a usage cap. If she went over 5 gigs, they would call up and say, "Yeah, you went over. Now you're going to have to start paying extra for what you use." And if she went over twice that, if she used 10 gigs in a month, they would just shut off her service for a month. They'd be like, "You use too much internet this month. You don't get to have it next month. Deal with it." So I was saying that they need to change. They had to change that, because if I was 15 years old today and I wanted the Xbox One, I'm out of luck. Tough shit. I live on the boonies. I can't use it. That would piss me off.
Well, the thing about that is you are kind of being selfish about it, because there's a lot of people that are still 15-year-old you. They are living out in the boonies, and they can't get these kind of connections. So it's a matter of solidarity. That's what boycotting is you boycott even if it's at a detriment to yourself, where you do want to play this game, you do want to get the system, but they are being so cruel to people that aren't in your situation that you just don't get it. And it hurts you, but you know you're doing it to help other people.
Well,
that's what the essence of boycotting is.
That's what I was doing. I was boycotting the system. I wasn't going to put money towards it until they changed it. They changed it. I'm like, okay, cool. You're changing that. Now I will support you.
In the few minutes we have left, what do you think about the purely digital way that things are going? Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
I think it really comes down to how they handle it, for one thing. Because people that defended the Xbox One before their decisions were like, "Why do you let Steam have a free pass?" Because Steam rewards you for using Steam. Microsoft is not shown to do that.
Yeah, the thing about digital games, Digital games cost almost nothing to produce and distribute. It's just data. If you buy a game in the store, it's a physical product. It had to be manufactured. They had to design cover art for it. They had to design sleeves. They had to manufacture these plastic cases. They had to create the book and the data and everything that goes into the book and all the graphic design for that. And that has a cost.
Of course,
and that
nowadays,
goes into your $60 game. They cannot charge you $60 for a game that's purely digital. If it's purely digital, it has to be down in price. That's the only way that this is going to work. People love Steam and gave Steam a free pass on their digital-only thing and bitched at Microsoft about it. Is like, when was the last fucking time you saw a Microsoft sale on their website for anything decent? Steam has sales every fucking day.
Yeah.
And they had one just a couple weeks ago that lasted for 10 days and had like 80% of the store on sale. That is why Steam is awesome. They put these games on sale for cheap, and they know that they can make it cheap because it is purely digital.
Yeah,
and
PlayStation does the same thing with PlayStation Plus. It rewards people for that membership. They're like, okay, you can have these 3 games for free. Oh, and we'll knock some money off of these retail games for you. Steam has the summer sale and the Christmas sale and a whole whack of other sales throughout the year.
And now they started doing the trading cards, which is basically free money for playing games.
Yeah.
And the thing with Microsoft, they just started doing the sales on their games on demand. Like with, I think I can't even remember the name of the sale that they had after E3. It was like, they were just knocking prices left and right on their digital, their games on demand. I'm like, good job. You're about 4 or 5 years too late.
Yeah, when we've seen some companies are really unwilling to budge on their price points, like EA. They made Origin because they don't want their games to be on sale, more or less. They flat out said, we don't believe our games devalue in price just because they've been out for a while.
Madden. Sorry.
And even when they stop supporting those games, they want to charge full price for them.
And Activision's a little better about it because at least they do still have their stuff on Steam. They just, their games almost feel like a slap in the face when they're up there with the other games on the Steam sale because they'll have, the Call of Duty game that's the one before the latest one and they still want $40 for it on sale. It's like, yeah, go fuck yourself.
But it's 10% off. So.
It's like, yeah, go fuck yourself.
Okay, Ozzie, where can everybody find you?
Sorry, planetarcane.blogspot.com.
And Johnny, how about you?
They can find me at youtube.com/achievementhornjohn.
And you can find me at testzero.net, youtube.com/DragonSlayerProd, and you can see us all at reviewersunknown.com. We will see you folks later.